So, before we start, and there's a bit of echo, so this is the 10th year of SteelCon, and it's also the second branded talk Fuck off!
How long was that? Did you time that? How long did that take?
6 seconds. What I was about to say was, I will not try to swear after this slide, so we're all right at the moment. But yeah, so this is the 10th birthday of SteelCon. It's not the 10th year, because technically COVID happened in the between. I think it's like 11th or 12th year. But little known fact, it's also Robin's birthday on Monday. So, I don't know if anyone suggested it, but in the closing ceremonies we should definitely sing him happy birthday. Or we give him Jaeger bombs, yeah. So, yeah, we'll make a start. If the clicker works. So, welcome back after lunch. This is track 1. If you're not here to see this guy, this is Andy Gill and Craig Underhill, then you're in the wrong place. There's 2 perfectly great talks in track 2 and track 3. I'm not organised like Phoenix, I don't know what they are, but I'm sure they're great. So, today we're going to talk to you about drinking from the same fire hose. There is lots of innuendos with that title. My boss has made lots of them, and I won't make them, but I'm wearing pink, you can take from that what you will. And we're talking about how we outrun red teams. Not red teams, threat actors. Quick disclaimer before we go, because this is a corporate branded talk, all the attack paths are examples. They don't represent specific environments or clients, nothing will be named. We do have an attack path later on which we'll walk through Scattered Spider end to end, and that has been taken from the public blog that we've written. Craig will talk through that in a little bit. So, little intro. So, for those of you who maybe don't know who we are, I'm Craig Underhill.
I'm Andy Gill.
This is Andy Gill. A bit of a description as to why you might be seeing some strange profile pictures. So there's a story behind my profile picture. So I've just come off a 4-month insider threat for an organisation, and they onboarded me as a legitimate employee. Well, as legit as you can get. They gave me a laptop. I was doing dev work, but they named me Sebastian Vettel because clearly I sound German and look like a racing driver. So with Craig's expert, was it MS Paint? Was it GIMP? What was it? MS Paint skills. He took my current Slack profile picture and put it onto Sebastian Vettel, and I mean, you can't tell the difference. It just looks tremendous. And likewise, I thought it was only fair that Craig got a similar great Photoshop, and his looks even better because we got a PNG image which has got no background, so it looks really sexy. I took his LinkedIn profile picture and put it on Famous Kalima, who are Famous Kalima again? Oh yeah, they're the North Koreans. They do all the scary stuff, like insider threats and things. So today we're going to walk through lots of different things around what it's like to red team at a vendor. We're going to talk about the evolution of threat actors. We're going to walk through kind of lessons learned and also some example attack paths and some bits and pieces over time. Like I said, I'm not going to try not to swear. If I do swear, you have my permission to shoot me. However, what I do request is if you could try not to shoot me, because we've done a lot of run-throughs this. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, this is Craig's first ever public talk.
So yeah, track 1, go big or go home. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I forgot to say on the previous slide. So we work for CrowdStrike's services red team. CrowdStrike is known because they've got an EDR, pretty popular, but they have 2 red teams. They've got an internal red team that tests all of CrowdStrike's things, so all the infrastructure, all the product, all the bits and pieces, and they've got an external red team, which is us, the professional services division. And what we do is we work for different clients, so we're not just testing customers that have got Falcon, we're testing customers that have got MDE, Sentinel-1, Carbon Black, Huntress, all the different EDRs, we're up against them. And we operate much the same as a normal consultancy would, but with the backing of working for a large vendor. So we'll get into this a little bit later on. We've got access to a lot of different toys. We've got colleagues who are in the front row, who we're always up against, which is fun. And yeah, it's good times. So, into it. I'm going to start off with not a controversial topic, but an interesting one. Adversarial emulation versus simulation. They are 2 phrases that are used interchangeably and also used incorrectly. Adversarial emulation works off of historical data. it is looking at existing threat actors, so the ones that got caught, the shit ones. My bad. Okay, I get it. The not so good ones. Just me, not him. I mean, it's fine. The not so good ones. So emulation focuses on the ones that have been caught, the ones that have been named, the ones that are known about, the ones that have got TTPs. And they're based off of testing your defensive technology, your detection response, to see how you match against known threats. So can you detect known TTPs? Can you detect things that are known in your environment? I'm going to get PTSD after this from all these clocking these things. Whereas, please don't add to it. Just gonna like be walking down the street and just gonna I'm like, oh no. But we're not in Chicago. If anyone was in Phoenix's talk this morning, Phoenix's talk was about Chicago gangs and how they kill each other. Please nobody actually take out a real gun. It'd be really sad if it died on stage. But then you'd have to take over, so it'd be fine.
It wouldn't.
So whereas simulation focuses on taking a known threat actor, so take an example, Scatter Spider, famous Kalima, so Scatter Spider are an e-crime threat actor. So for those of you who are maybe not aware, CrowdStrike have got naming conventions for their threat actors. They will take an animal that is mildly related to the country, and then they'll put a word in front of it depending on their TTP. So they've got things like Kalima, which isn't a real animal, it's a mythical being, but that's for North Korea, because North Korea is a mythical land. They've got things like bear, so most of you will have heard of like fancy bear, cozy bear, that's for like Russia, and then you've got many other animals for many other countries. But then you've got spider, which is what they relate to as criminals. So technically anyone that's doing hacking is a criminal, but kind of e-crime threat actors. So Scatter Spider, they've been in the news quite famously, quite popularly, and they're scattered. They're kind of globally. I don't know how they named the Scatter Spider, but they've got some cool naming conventions. But what I'm getting at is we take the threat actor, we look at how they do things, and then we use creativity to kind of not quite emulate step for step what they're doing, but be more creative around it. So it builds the kind of the foundations of the operator. So Craig or myself or one of our colleagues. Our knowledge, our domain knowledge, all these other bits and pieces, and then adds that element of creativity to it. So you're simulating the actions of the threat actor, but you're not emulating them step for step. And why this is a controversial topic is because in the corporate world, what you find, I mean, you find it in the general consultancy world as well, is the terms are used interchangeably and they're also used incorrectly. So whereby you might look for a red team. Mostly in the UK market, it's called red teaming, and you can get red teaming from one vendor and they'll do a red team in a week, and it's not the same as another vendor that'll do a red team in 6 months. You're looking at like apples and pears kind of things. So AdSim, AdM, they are interchangeable terms, but they're not the same thing. So they're much more used in America, where you see that we're going to get red team done, it's an AdM, actually it's an AdSim in reality. So that's the differences. We're going to look at kind of evolution of threat actors, so I should probably preface this. I'm going to talk about for the first half of the talk, and then Craig's going to pick up for the second half, but we've got a couple of slides in between where we'll have interchangeable speakers, so you're not listening to my boring voice the whole time. Yay! So, threat actor evolution. The slides are a bit dark, but essentially, over time, anyone who was at Neil's talk before lunch will have seen over time the kind of TTPs that have evolved. Now, Neil didn't go through all the different TTPs, but he did touch on some interesting points from a historical standpoint. Ooh, it's getting dark. Over time, we've seen that social engineering was the initial access vector for a lot of times. You'd be sending in attachments, you'd be harvesting credentials, you'd be calling people up, asking them for their password, say, oh, hi, this is Bill from IT, your laptop's having issues, can you give me your password, please? And most users will comply because it's Bill from IT. IT never call me, surely they want to help. And then over the years, it moved on to kind of all the rest phishing. So you've got phishing, for example, great term. Postal-based phishing. So something that a lot of people might not have come across in anyone that's in the kind of crypto bro sphere. I'm not in it anymore, even though I found a Doge wallet the other day with 500,000 Doge in it. It's still sinking. I won't have it for a while. But they get targeted with phishing. Terrible phrase. They get targeted with phishing, which essentially means that they will get a phishing email in the post. And one of the most popular campaigns that's been more recent is that they'll have the different wallets, so the crypto wallets. They'll have a wallet shipped them in the post, which has been backdoored, so that you transfer your cryptocurrency into that wallet, and then, oh no, my cryptocurrency is gone because it's been stolen by criminals. So what we've learned from this is don't do crime while you're doing crime. Best phrase. Over time, what we've seen as well is that payloads have evolved. So from a threat actor perspective, we started out in the early days using macros, using EXEs, attachments, then moved on to things like HTML smuggling, so you click on a link, and then moved back to targeting the cloud again and targeting web apps and all this sort of things. And then what we've seen more recently is supply chain attacks, where we're going after malware all the things. That's a case of backdoor dependencies. If anyone was in Ian's workshop yesterday, one of the things that he was going to do, I don't know if he did it in his workshop in the end, was backdoor dependencies, where you backdoor a Go dependency or a Python dependency or a library, and then you run a pipeline, and that's obviously pulling it down from Git, and your backdoor gets into the environment that way. And what we've seen from kind of nation-state threat actors is they're doing that. They're targeting open source projects that they know that companies are using so that they can get into an organization that way, and it's quite interesting. And then more recently, talking about Scatter Spider, you've seen the kind of more high-profile cases in the news recently. So there was 4 operators arrested from Scatter Spider. Scatter Spider's TCPs tend to align to the kind of adversarial sysadmin element of things. So they are very good systems administrators. They will walk through the steps that, Craig will talk about this in depth later on, but they will walk through the steps that a sysadmin would take. They're using remote management tools, they're reading documentation, and they're using systems as designed. So once they get in, they're not going to drop Mimikatz on disk, or they're not going to drop Cobalt Strike on disk, or whatever else. They're not going to try and establish C2. They're going to use your systems like they're meant to operate against you. But how does this compare to red team evolution? Red teams, historically, have always been around, well, as long as I've been doing it, it's been around adversarial simulation. So you're using the creativity of the operator, you're using the insight and the knowledge and the different creative techniques. Like, I've learned a lot from a lot of you in the audience over time. They've suggested things in the pub, we've been talking about bits and pieces, like, oh, what if we do this? Like, a good example is Neil. So Neil gave a talk last year about using Explorer for searching for things, and I use Explorer all the time. And what that made me think is, right, okay, we can use advanced operators in Explorer. We can use advanced operators, so like and then star and all these sorts of bits and pieces. We can use that in SharePoint. We can use that in other systems. And I went and wrote a blog post called LOL searches, or living off the land searches, because there's not enough LOLs. And essentially taking that idea that Neil had talked about in depth and building it out into something that's more weaponized. So, much the same as threat actors, but a little bit different. We've seen over time that red teams are very focused on the external facing. So anyone who's a red team operator in the audience, even someone who's in blue, or even just pen testing in general, you'll have the objective of getting into an organization probably 9 out of 10 times from the outside. Sometimes you do a SIM breach. But you're looking at the external facing perimeter, you're performing web application-based pen testing, well, not quite pen testing, but you're finding the gaps in controls so you can get access to the internal environment. You're also looking at the infrastructure, so you're looking at things like, not so much nowadays, but is Telnet open, is FTP open, are things like Memcache open, like, I think the port is 11011, I think is the port off the top of my head. That is, if you can connect to that unauthenticated, you can dump memory from a box, and then that can give you a lot of information, which has been used in a lot of cases from a threat actor perspective. But that kind of stuff, you're doing port scanning, you're looking at Shodan, you're looking at Census, you're looking at ZoomEye, all the different external things, you're building up a profile. What you're also doing is you're looking at credentials. So Neil talked about this, touched on this earlier on. You're looking at an organization, you're doing your deep open source intelligence. Maybe you've got a fake LinkedIn profile, maybe you're a recruiter, maybe you work at the same company. Top tip, if you're ever doing OSINT against the company, don't create a LinkedIn profile and then do it the next day, because LinkedIn gets suspicious. If you've got a red team coming up, say you've got a red team coming up in 3 months' time, or 6 weeks' time, create a LinkedIn profile if you don't already have one. And give them a history. So say that they've been working at a company for a couple of years. But one thing that I found that works really well is if you say that the account was an intern at the company that you're targeting. Because what that does on the LinkedIn side is that when you go to, so anyone that uses LinkedIn, when you go to connect with someone, if you are a third connection, you've not got any mutual connections with the person you're trying to connect with. But if you say that you worked for a company, that unlocks the ability to connect to second connections and potentially first connections as well. This isn't a talk about how to break into companies, but just some kind of tips. So one of the other things you can do with that, which I find really useful and I've been using for years, is you create this account, you give it history, you work for lots of different companies, and you connect to people that used to work for the companies. You're not targeting the company directly. You're not going to send them anything malicious, but you're just connecting to them so that you're getting that kind of closer to your target. And one of the other things that I've learned over the years is connect to HR people and connect to internal recruiters. HR people, most of the time, will know other people within the organization. And if you connect to them, you go from being a third connection to a second connection, which gets you closer to your target. And what you can find as well is, even if you don't pay for premium, this is going to just be like LinkedIn 101, but if you don't pay for a premium, what you can do is essentially, if you become a second connection with high-profile connections to that company, you can message people without being connected to them. I didn't swear there. Well, who was shooting at me? I didn't fucking swear, see? Okay. Jesus Christ. Right, okay, I'll take that one on the... That's an excuse to have some water, I suppose. Well, we've learnt that people listen to instructions, that's good. What was I saying? I was saying when you connect to people, you connect to HR people, you make connections, you can message them, you can send them things. And going off of Neil's point, bring people to you. So one of the things that I love doing, and I've been doing over the years, is building up a fake recruitment agency. I used ChatGPT to set up a real website. I used GitHub Pages to host that website. I used Improv MX to have a wildcard domain to send myself emails, put a name, any name, and then create that. And then you connect to people, and then you post fake job ads. You just go like, oh, I'm looking for developers. And then loads of people want to become your friends straight away, and then some of those people work at the companies, and that's how you build up rapport. That's hacking 101 in a nutshell. Don't do crime, crime's illegal, have permission, all that sorts of stuff. So that's the external portion of red teaming that's evolved over time. We've also moved over to payloads. We've seen that mark of the web has been quite prevalent over the years, so when you send a user a payload, be it via download or a third-party application, maybe over LinkedIn, maybe something else, you're going to face mark of the web, so you're looking at mark of the web bypasses. What mark of the web is essentially is when you download something in your browser, it works in Outlook as well, when you download something, it has like a marker on the file, which is an alternate data stream on the file. And when a user goes to open it, they're prompted with either smart screen or other things that says, this is suspicious, this is coming from the web, are you sure you want to run this? So the ways that you get around that is you can use trusted applications, you can use all sorts of bits and pieces. We used it recently using the client's own application against them, which is great fun. Which, yeah, that was flawless. What did we fish? 4 people, and we got 4 hits out of 4, or something like that. So yeah, it's great. Always use people's tools like they're meant to be used against them, especially if they're a communications company, because why not? But what we've also seen over the year, much the same way as threat actors, is that we've gone to the malware element of things. We've seen a massive uptick in different C2 frameworks. Like Cobalt Strike existed, POS C2 existed, the original brains behind POS C2 is in the room, Mr. Dave Hartley, which Neil forgot off of his slide. We've seen C2 expand. We've seen things like Brute Retail. We've seen Nighthawk. We've seen that there's Havoc Pro that's just come out. All these sorts of things. But what we've also seen over the years, because I've been doing red teaming for a while, is lots of different C2 channels. So not just frameworks, but channels. So for those in the room who have maybe done red team for a while, they might be aware of a tool called C3, which was written by MWR a while ago. What that allowed you to do was to use pretty much anything as an external C2 channel. So you could use Slack, you could use Teams, you could use Discord, you could use Outlook, Dropbox, you name it, you could probably use it for a C2 channel. And we've seen over time that EDR vendors, we happen to work for one, funnily enough, they look at these channels and they start to build detections for them. So we've gone full circle. We've looked at all the different avenues that you can use for C2 channels and then gone back to web. We've gone back to different redirectors, different things, different applications, and being very calculated about how we use C2 channels. So one of the things that Craig and I both do this, is we will look at environments. So before we even try and establish C2, we'll look at an environment. What applications are in the environment? Like, is it a Windows environment? Or is it in AWS? Or is it in GCP? Or is it wherever? Is that going to be connected? So, a good example here. If you compromise a box in Azure, it's probably not going to be calling out to AWS. You're probably not going to use like AWS redirector. You're going to use an Azure redirector. Likewise, if you've got an EC2 instance, granted it's a Windows machine, probably not going to use an Amazon binary with a Windows, like Azure or whatever, because that sticks out like a sore thumb. Similarly, looking at processes. So when you get down the route of process injection, you're looking at what processes are on the box, what do these processes do, and why might I use them as an avenue for attack? A good example of this is, for example, in Windows 11. Notepad connects out to the internet. Most things connect out to the internet, but if you're targeting a Windows 10 environment or even Windows 7, Notepad's probably not going to connect out to the internet. It's probably not going to do LDAP traffic. It's probably not going to do Kerberos. It's probably not going to do SMB. So if you're loading in app domains into a Notepad process, it probably looks suspicious. So I'd probably stay away from that. And just looking at the environment. We've also found that in red teaming, it does vary, but we tend to target the organization directly. So we're not looking at supply chain as much. If it's within scope, there are avenues for it, but for the most part, you're targeting the organization directly. You've got authorization to target that company or its child companies. And then also, what's the same as threat actors? We've got adversarial sysadmin. So the term red teaming, is becoming more prevalent. When I get into an organization, the first thing I do is I look for your wiki, I look for your Jira, I look for your SharePoint, I look for any internal documentation that a standard user would have access to. I look for your onboarding guides, I look for your IT documentation. I'm not bothered about password. Like Neil was talking about some interesting points about searching for password. I'm more concerned about, well, not concerned, I'm more interested in how you operate as a business and how I can operate as a model employee to not get caught. Because the hardest operators to catch are the ones that are acting as standard users. My most favorite wasn't when I was working at CrowdStrike, it was a couple of companies ago. My most favorite red team that I've ever done, I sat and watched someone do their job for 3 weeks. Just sat on RDP shadowing and watched how they did their job. And every time they went away to get like a coffee break or a smoke break, I'd do a little bit of work. But I'd take a screenshot before so that I knew what was on screen, bring it back up. They were none the wiser. That's adversarial activity, but I'm not using any malware there. I'm using built-in. I'm using MSTSC, which is RDP, built-in. What we've also seen is that the evolution of targeting has moved towards targeting identity-based attacks. So EDR is great, but if you don't have an identity product, you're missing a lot of attack surface. You're missing things like Active Directory Certificate Services-based attacks. Yes, MDE does it, yes, CrowdStrike does it, yes, SentinelOne does it, but if you don't have some degree of identity protection or identity monitoring, you're going to miss the things like credentials. Like, good example, we compromise an environment, maybe we compromise a Confluence instance, and we find a service account in that Confluence instance, and we log in as that service account. Now, it transpired that service account hasn't logged in for 10 years. If you don't have identity, or an identity product, you're not going to be any the wiser unless you've got custom logging set up with like Sysmon or something else, that account's logged in. Now, for most organizations, that's not going to be suspicious because they don't know about it. What you don't know about, you can't worry about. But when you do see that, you should be like, well, something's not matching up here. We've got a service account that has been inactive, effectively, for 10 years. It doesn't have any permissions, but it's just logged into a box. That should raise some red flags somewhere. So that's something to consider. And then finally, I'm always half and half on this, but we've seen more that red teaming and adversarial simulation and adversarial emulation have started to use threat intelligence more. So you've got regulatory frameworks, you've got things like DORA, things like TBER, things like CBEST, XBEST, etc. You've got things like ICAST. All over the world, you've got regulatory frameworks, and those regulatory frameworks, for anyone who's ever done them or performed red teams either from a receiving end or a delivery end, will know that you need to have an element of threat intelligence-led red teaming. Now, what that threat intelligence often uncovers is a profile. So it's anyone who's not looked at threat intelligence or seen threat intelligence or even has any idea, it's basically open source intelligence, but on crack cocaine. Because you've got... I didn't swear, it's just a bit... Yeah, anyway. It's on crack cocaine. You get all... you get all the information that you would from OSINT, but much more, because you've got a broader understanding, you've got more threat feeds, you've got more credentials, you've got all these different things. And why I've included it in the evolution of red teaming is that in years past, we would look at public breaches, we would look at things like dehashed, have I been pwned, all these different things. But now what we're seeing is things like stealer logs. So when organizations are already compromised, maybe you've got bring your own device, which is probably the best thing from a red team perspective and the worst thing from a blue team perspective. You've got all that information, and if for example, you're using a cracked version of Photoshop, your employees are using a cracked version of Photoshop, that might be backdoored with a stealer, piece of malware that's sitting. You can use Photoshop all you like to make crappy, not swearing, crappy profile pictures, And all the while, your data has been pilfered off to some Telegram group in Russia, and that's been sold on the dark web and then being used for threat intelligence purposes. So that's the evolution of red teaming. What's it actually like to red team at a vendor? I'm going to hand the mic over to Craig.
Thank you.
To press the buttons. There you go.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So, as Andy mentioned, we work for CrowdStrike Services Red Team, and the information that we are able to obtain from threat intelligence, from our incredible threat intelligence team, and all the information that they see from the wild, allows us to utilize that information to identify emerging TTPs that threat actors are known to be using in the wild. That also helps us to incorporate those within our red team engagements, but also helps us improve our internal research and development when it comes to internal tools to ensure that we're staying ahead of those adversaries. We also utilize our other internal teams, such as incident response. So, for example, they've been inundated recently with scatter spider cases. So we're able to utilize the information that they're seeing from those with our inter-team collaboration to identify the TTPs that they're utilizing so that we can then use those when we're trying to simulate them as an adversary. We also have direct pipelines to our internal engineering teams. So whilst they're obviously not going to share the secret sauce when it comes to the Falcon platform or the Falcon sensor,
sometimes they do. This guy chat.
No names. It is possible for us to utilize our position within CrowdStrike to ask questions, general questions, where required, to gain additional information that can aid us on our red team engagements. However, there is a double-edged sword to being in the red team at CrowdStrike, because as you know, we are a majority a defensive organization when it comes to EDR. So when we have success on red team engagements against Falcon customers where we're able to perform activities which is then not seen by the blue team, we then obviously have those difficult questions being seen by the customer as why we or why CrowdStrike weren't able to see the particular activity, which is where we have some quite difficult conversations sometimes.
We're all friends.
We are all friends. Also, our failures on red team, so everything that we perform on a red team isn't obviously going to be successful, and there'll be times where we are not able to achieve what we want to. This isn't a bad thing. It enables the client and the Falcon team to understand and realize that their security controls in place are valid and successful in blocking us. But it also shows that the Falcon sensor and the Falcon products, like Falcon Identity, are doing their job. This also builds onto the third point of every engagement improves what protects our customers. So as I said, every success and every failure, that's all telemetry. So when we are successful, there's lessons learned, same for the failures, which can then build back into the Falcon platform to then improve it further for our customers. And it's also a bit of a game. So we've got our Falcon Overwatch
in the front
people
row.
Here on the front row. These are the guys on the other side of the coin, or the blue team, when we're performing engagements against Falcon customers. There'll be engagements where we're looking to get detected, for example, red team, blue teams, which we call it, to purple teaming. But on adversary emulations and simulations, we're doing everything that we can to remain undetected. So when we're performing activities, we're ensuring that everything that we do stays that way. Otherwise, we know that the person on the other end who is then picking up that triaged detection is obviously our colleagues and friends.
And they'll bully us in Slack when they catch us.
Yes, as you well know.
Yeah. Oh, you skipped.
Wrong way.
Oh, other way.
There you go.
Me. So now you get me for a couple more minutes. So one of the other things that differs working at a red team, Craig's already touched on it quite a bit, I'm going to touch on it in the next couple of slides, is we get access to a lot more data than a typical consultancy. So for anyone who's maybe not aware of how an EDR product works, an EDR is like analytics on extreme steroids. So look at Google Analytics. It's gathering telemetry about what's going on the endpoint. And one of the things that a lot of threat actors and even red teams misunderstand about EDR products, not just CrowdStrike, this is applicable to ND, it's applicable to SentinelOne, is they're watching what you're doing all the time. And they're not designed to stop initial access. They're designed to stop you when you get to access and objectives. So you might get initial execution, and you see a lot of blog posts, you see a lot of YouTube videos where they've got an EDR bypass because they've got execution on the endpoint and they've established C2. But it's only when they start to do actions that they're considered malicious or something that's out of the norm, like what I was talking about earlier on, where you've got Notepad or an application that maybe shouldn't be doing actions that it's doing, is when the EDR steps in and goes, right, hold, stop that, don't touch that. So we've got access to a lot of that telemetry. We don't have access to the whole suite because that wouldn't be fair, but we do have access to a lot of tools that the Intel team have written, a lot of tools that the Blue team have written, and also a lot of insights from the incident response team. So whereby, because we've got clients, because we've got mutual clients with the, like the incident response team, for example, they'll be seeing stuff in environments and they'll ask for our opinion. And likewise, they've maybe seen something in a breach. And like a good example is, oh, I've seen ADCS in use from an IR perspective. How can the red team help with this? And using that insight, when we come to do a red team next year, we go, oh, they've got ADCS in their environment. That's a potential avenue for attack. But what we've also got is lots of knowledge sharing. So not just within the different teams, but within the red team. And one of the things that's quite unique working at CrowdStrike, and this is applicable to a lot of other vendors, we've got a very large professional services red team. We've got a red team that's based in EMEA. So we've got, what, 12, 13 people in EMEA?
13, I think. Yeah,
13 people in EMEA. We've got 10 in Asia Pacific, so we've got people that speak different languages. And we've also got about 60 in America and Canada. So as a result, in effect, we've got a follow-the-sun red team, which is quite unique. And what it means is, because a lot of you will know I have chronic insomnia, so I'm awake at any time, any day. And if I've got questions, I'll ask them at 3 in the morning, I'll ask them at 4 in the morning, and the APJ guys will be online, or the Americans will be going just to bed, and they'll be able to ask bits and pieces. Or maybe I'm awake till 5, and APJ are struggling with something, I'm like, oh, let's jump on a Zoom call, and let's go through it, and it's because I'm awake, I'll just do it, which is great. But what we've also got is that unique learning from the different markets. Because I've been doing red teaming for a while, and I've worked with lots of different clients. I've worked with clients in Japan, I've worked with clients in Europe, worked with clients in America, all over the world. And the way that red teaming is done in different countries massively differs. Like doing a red team in Japan versus doing a red team in the UK. First of all, you're 8 hours behind in the UK, but also you've got different tactics, techniques, and procedures that are being performed because you're emulating different adversaries and you're performing different attacks. Also, the methodology for defense is much different in the likes of Asia, as it is to America, as it is to the UK. I find that the American market's been going for a lot longer, but in a lot of instances, it's far less mature than the UK market. And that's for a lot of different reasons. You've got lots of companies that are offering red team services, which is just pen testing. And they've been getting a red team every year. And then you go and you do a red team and you go, what have these guys been doing? Like, what have you learned from this? Either they haven't learned from it or it's a bit of both. And also, we get a lot more budget for toys. So working for a multi-billion-dollar organization, we have money to buy cool things. So, quick show of hands, who's used Hashcat in the room? Most of the room. This is one of our Hashcat rigs. This has got 8 4090s, I think, 8 or 9. Currently, it's got 128 gigs of RAM and a lot of storage. Water cooled, as you can see, custom water loop. Very, very good system. This is only one of them. There's like 3 of them throughout the organization, which is great because it means if we snag like a DCC2 hash, which is domain cache credentials, you don't see them very often, but if you do, you've got a decent chance of cracking it. Or if you snag a Kerberos ticket, or maybe you snag an NTLM hash, you don't see them now and again. If you do, you snag an NTLM hash, chuck it on the rig. Either you crack it with a word list, or because there's so much GPU power, you can brute force the 8 and 9 character key space pretty quickly. I think we do the 8 character key space in about 3 minutes, like the entire key space, and then the 9 is about an hour, so it's not bad. And it means that if there's any takeaways, if anyone's got an 8 character password policy, you're screwed. Not swearing either. So it's fine. So yeah, that's the... I just keep hearing the clocking of the guns. It's terrifying. Anyone who's watching this on video is going to have no idea what's going on. Just be like, Andy is insane. But the t-shirt does say that, so it's kind of fine. That's fine. What we've had from lessons learned. So, at the very top here, working at a vendor, we see evolving techniques. And proper red teaming isn't just Active Directory. Actually, in the last probably 12, well, I've been at CrowdStrike for a year, so probably the last 8 months, the last couple of red teams that I've done, none of them have actually used Active Directory, with the exception of one we've just done. Most of it's been in the cloud, most of it's been targeting pipelines, most of it's been targeting identity-based attacks. So you're looking at legitimate credentials from things like breach data, from things like stealers, and logging into technically applications that are owned by the organization externally and using those to gain initial access. So a good example was an engagement that we've just finished. We compromised the organization's kind of communications platform that they used for communication with like call center agents, and we used that to send a payload in because it allowed you to drop MSI files into the chat, and then users be able to run them. And we fished 4 people, and we got four sets of credentials. And no, sorry, we got 4 payloads, and then 3 sets of credentials, which is still a very high success rate. But what we've also seen is that red teaming is not pen testing with C2. So something that is quite apparent, and I've seen it over time from speaking to people at different companies, and also from working at different companies, a lot of people think that, oh, I've done pen testing, so red teaming will be no problem. I'll be able to just jump in the deep end and do it all. I can just use Cobalt Strike, I can just use whatever C2 product. But in actual fact, red teaming isn't that. There's a lot of elements of, you've got the pen test element of adversarial thinking, where you're thinking outside the box, you're looking at evading detection, looking at performing techniques. But you've also got the kind of thinking like what your objective is. So Neil and I talked about this last year, we talked about this year before. The objective to get domain admin in a pen test, great. In a red team, probably not. And what we're seeing with threat actors is that threat actors aren't going after the domain admin. They're going after databases. They're going after sensitive data. They don't care about privileged access to start with. They'll maybe go after it later on, but that's not their primary focus. Or if they're going after specific systems, they'll get domain admin as stage 0, and then they'll go after the things after that, because once you're domain admin, in a Windows environment specifically, you can become other users by DC syncs, by impersonation. You've got admin on the different boxes, you can do credential dumping, all the different attacks. But equally, because it's not just pen testing with C2, you've got to think outside the box, you've got to think about other systems. So you use that element of read teaming, where you're looking at the documentation, you're looking at what exists, and you're using those techniques against an organization. And likewise, for anyone who's done consultancy, a lot of people in the room will have done, it's moving targets, moving goalposts. So put your hand up if you ever had a client change their engagement, mid-engagement. Yeah? We've all seen it. You see it the same working at a vendor. It's nothing different, really. What we also see is that we're constantly managing expectations across the organization. Because we work for a large EDR vendor, not only do we need to be performing really great at the evasion stuff, but we've also got to be, at some points, making the product look good, because we don't want to be being like, the baby's ugly, because we own the baby. We don't own the baby, that sounds really bad, but...
Not quite.
Yeah, not quite. That's a completely different topic. So we need to be kind of cognizant of our colleagues as well, whereby we've got friends who came up with a term yesterday where we're frenemies, so we're professional enemies, but friends in real life. We just need to keep that balancing act going. And also what I talked about earlier on is read teaming, or red teaming, read teaming. It's all about reading documentation and using that information to your advantage. And the thing as well is, because we're looking at non-active directory-based attacks, this might even just be a case of reading documentation. You're not looking for credentials, you're not looking for sensitive data. Sometimes I just want to know how a tool works. Like a good example, I released a technique back in March called commit stomping. Now, what commit stomping is it allows you to backdate the dates in a Git commit history. And I only found that from reading GitHub Enterprise documentation. So, out the box, by default, GitHub, like GitHub.com, has a mode called Vigilant Mode. And what that means is that when you commit things to GitHub that have incorrect timestamps, or an incorrect SSH key, or something else, they will show up in the GUI as unsigned. So there's a big yellow box that says unsigned. However, if you've got GitHub Enterprise in your environment, that's not turned on by default. So what you can do is you can change the date on any commit, push it up to prod, or dev, or whatever, and it doesn't show as being suspicious. The only way that you would spot it is if a developer pulls down the latest branch and there's maybe inconsistencies. But how many times have we all done coding where you pull something down and something's a bit strange, you don't think anything of it? So developers are sometimes none the wiser. So the way commit stomping works is you backdate it, you can push it up, and you can change the name of who you're committing as. That's a feature of Git. And as far as I'm aware, from a defensive standpoint, there's nothing you can do about it, other than monitoring your branches, having branch protections in place, all these other bits and pieces. But if you've got, for example, branch protection bypass for admins, and you become admin, then that's another problem again. So, and then finally, kind of talked about moving goalposts. It's also a fine balancing act. So we need to balance operational security with realistic expectations. And what I mean by this is that we can do a red team for 3 months and not get caught because we're being low and slow. But ultimately, the objective of most red teams is to uncover new findings in environments, but also playtest the blue team. So it might be that we identify attack paths quite early on that are going to be quite noisy. They're probably going to get us caught. And we'll probably put that in our back pocket for the last week or the last couple of weeks because we want to get caught. We want to see what the detection response is like. Because getting caught's fine. I love getting caught. It's the point where what happens once you get caught? Anyone who's in the blue team, when you catch an adversary or something malicious in your environment, what do? You go, oh, cool. Some of you will go, that's cool, mark it as, that's a true positive, we'll deal with that later. Other people go, oh, it's a red team, cool, and they just keep going. And then you've still got access to the environment. You're still retaining access to the environment. I like being eradicated from environments because it makes my job harder, and I like it, well, it makes my job more difficult. It's more fun. But we've also got the pressure of eating your own dog food. And what I mean by that is not to encourage anyone to eat dog food. It's not great. I've tried it before. What I mean is looking at the product, looking at the defensive technologies and defensive approaches and applying them to the way in which we do red teaming. So that's a case of protecting your infrastructure. It's having your own product on your C2 servers. It's having really robust security for your payloads. It's keying them to your environment. It's looking at processes. It's looking at all these different things that we apply as a defensive company that we can apply from an offensive perspective. So the benefits of cross-team collaboration. Anyone who saw me talk at security will have seen a diagram similar to this. I'm not going to blind Craig with a laser pointer because that's probably a bad idea. What we've got working at CrowdStrike is we've got access to all these different teams. I need to be careful. My shoulder subluxes and falls out of place, and that'd be terrible live on stage, so I'll just keep here. So starting from the bottom left here, I need to be careful, bottom left, right. We have adversary playbook access. So we've got access to a really good threat intelligence team. They're probably one of the best in the world. And this is not a sales pitch talk. I'm just here to say the cool stuff. You guys have seen me, you guys and gals and folks have seen me talk. I'll be honest about things. If it's shit, I'll tell you it's shit. Oh, no. Jesus. Right. Okay, I get the point. Oh, no. So we've got... I'm just going home. That's bit of fun. It wouldn't be SteelCon without chaos. I didn't swear there. What was that? We've got access to adversary playbooks. We can look at continuous intelligence. We can look at emerging TTPs and how threat actors are doing things badly, so we can do the better. We've also got access to people like Logan and other people within detection engineering who are actively threat hunting. And what I mean from this is when we've got our findings, so we've already done the red team at this point, we've got access to we've got the objectives, we've got whatever. We'll probably feed some of our findings back to our threat hunting teams so they can close those gaps. Maybe we've used a new tactic. Maybe we've used something that's maybe, a good example is something that maybe not a lot of people know. VM tools, for example, VMware, by default ships with 7-zip. I only learned this recently. If you go into a virtual machine, there's a VM tools folder. In the VM tools folder, there's a 7za.exe, which is 7-zip. So you don't even need to, you can bring 7-zip. If you're in a virtual environment, VMs, you can use 7-zip to unzip your payloads. You can do all sorts of things. So we get that information, we feed it back, and then people like Logan and people in Falcon Complete and people in detection engineering and ProdSec, they'll build detections for those things, which ultimately makes our job harder, but also I want it to be harder. I don't want easy wins all the time. I like a challenge. We've also got access to not threat intelligence, the incident response teams. So because we're in the professional services division, we've got the incident response teams, we've got the security advisory teams, we've got platform operations, we've got, I don't know what the other professional services are we have, we've got lots. It's quite a few. Incident response specifically, it's putting you on the spot here, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
We've got insight into attacks as they're happening. And why this is interesting from a red team perspective is if we're looking to gain initial access into an organization, maybe we would be looking at phishing to start with, and then we're going, actually, you guys are dealing with you guys are dealing with cases at the moment where threat actors are going after appliances, or they're going after vishing, or they're using deepfakes, or they're getting job interviews, stuff that we'd normally do in red teams anyway. But that's working, that's quite successful against these industries, and because we've got that knowledge of these industries, we get a red team against that industry, and we go, oh, you guys use a help desk. You've got this kind of process. I bet it's the same for this other organization. And we'll use that insight to our advantage. Which brings in the simulation emulation game where you're actually emulating things that are happening in real time or in the real world and being able to use it to your advantage to give a more realistic kind of red team exercise for your clients. And then finally, we're highly collaborative. So I talked this a bit earlier on. Between the red team, the different teams that we talk to, and also just the client in general, we are very collaborative. We'll pass on techniques between each other. Like a good example is SCCM Hound. Has anyone heard of it? Anyone seen it? Yeah, maybe one or two. SCCM Hound is a tool by CrowdStrike, and it was written by the CrowdStrike red team. And it's essentially, it uses SCCM, which is the Microsoft's now kind of deprecated software management, where you can push out software to endpoints. And if you get SCCM admin, you can use SCCM Hound to have Bloodhound-like activity, or sorry, Bloodhound-like data using SCCM. So you use SCCM admin, connect to the endpoint, and then you map out everything in the environment. And the unique thing that it gives you is more session data. So anyone who's used Bloodhound or Sharphound recently, or even Soaphound, all the hounds will know that session data, especially in Windows 10 and Windows 11 environments, is becoming less prevalent. So if you've got SCCM and you've got SCCM admin, you can use SCCM Hound to get more session data, and then with session data you can find who's logged into one box, and then go and target them specifically. And why that's interesting is you can find when admins are logged in, or if you've got a specific objective. Say your objective is to go after, the biomechanics department. If you have a specific engineer that you know their username, you know their name, you want to find what boxes they're logged into, and you want to go and watch what they're doing, because I like spying on people, it's quite fun. I'll find the box they're logged into, I'll see if RDB shadowing is enabled. If it's not, I'll enable it, and I'll just watch what they're doing. Sit and watch what they're doing. Identify how a system operates so I can use it against them. So, is this over to you?
This is you, mate.
Is this still me? Oh, great.
This is still you.
Great. I've got plenty of time. So, Data Tsunami. Talked about a lot of this already, but we've got a lot of cross-team threat monitoring, real-time threat monitoring, so the product is always monitoring. We've got always get telemetry. We've got lots of tools that we've got access to. Talked about cross-team collaboration. All the time you've got dark web reconnaissance, so you've got access to breach data, you've got access to when breaches are happening, both from an incident response perspective, but also from a threat intelligence perspective, where you're seeing third parties getting breached, and you can use that data for your red teams. You've got operational benefits, so you can emulate relevant threats. You're not just doing the same red team day in, day out. And I should emphasize, this isn't a sales pitch at all. Like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm not here to sell you CrowdStrike as an organization. You can use whoever the fuck you want. Shit. I knew that was going to happen. I knew. Right, okay. I get it. So we're emulating relevant threats. We're prioritizing testing. So if we're identifying an area whereby there is an interesting target over here, there's also an interesting target over here, we're going, well, actually, threat actor XYZ goes after this. So why don't we go after this instead and see what you get? We're also being able to validate detection capabilities. So we're looking at what's being detected and how can we evade that detection. So cheating a little bit, but you're getting a bit of a broader insight. You're also learning from adversaries. So one of the things that I love about working at CrowdStrike, and it would be the same for working at any vendor, is I have access to the incident response team. I've got access to lots of different teams. And I get access to a lot of different case studies and a lot of interesting information, which gives me a deeper, broader understanding of how things have been done, what 0 days are being tracked, and how threat actors are performing their campaigns. And this feeds into a methodology that I've talked about time and time again. Sorry, this is making it hard for the cameraman because I'm walking about all over the place. Is a continuous improvement cycle. So we monitor for threats and TTPs, which allows us to analyze and adapt and evade those TTPs, which we can then implement into our capabilities, build metrics, and then finally refine them into tools and lessons learned, which we'll hand off to different engagements and pass through as we go. Is this me? Oh, I've gone back again.
You've gone back.
I'll just use this, it's probably easier. Computers are hard. Computers were a mistake. So I've done that one. It's back to you.
It's back to both of us, actually.
Oh yeah, so it is, yeah. So red teaming isn't a crime. It can be, but one of the kind of phrases that I've been using for a while that one of my friends who's a police officer told me is don't do crime while you're doing crime. And what I mean by that, or what they meant by that, is if you're doing one crime, don't do another crime that's going to get you caught for doing the first crime. Why is that relevant to red teaming? Well, red teaming technically is a crime unless you have authorization. Because a lot of people talk about, but this is going to sound really strange coming from someone who does ethical hacking. I don't do ethical hacking. I do hacking with permission. That's the biggest difference. If the scope says that I can do whatever I want, I'm going to do whatever I want. You can have flexible ethics, because ethics is a place in England. Funny. But as long as you're sticking to your objective and you've got permission to do it, then you're technically performing the actions that you're meant to be performing. So it's not a crime. And what we're going to see in a second is that we're all the same person. So in this slide, Craig and I are going to go back and forth through the different things. As you can imagine, I'm a criminal.
And I am the red team. And the key differences between a red team and equine threat actors are legal, ethical, and moral processes. So, for example, if I'm conducting a red team against a UK-based client, I'm also having to follow the Computer Misuse Act and ensure I conform with GDPR, ensure that I'm following the authorization note given to us by the client, and ensuring that any systems or users not to target during the engagement through the out-of-scope process is being followed.
Whereas I don't give a fuck about all those things. I was just preparing myself for getting shot at.
Just go behind the curtain.
Likewise.
Yeah. Another thing that the red team has to consider is the business impacts. So what we're trying not to do is obviously bring down our clients' production environments and ensuring that there's stability within the environment. So every activity that we're performing, we've known is not going to do that. All the tooling that we're going to be using has been tested to ensure it is stable.
Whereas I'm just going to make as much noise as I can in the environment. I'm going to cause as much impact as I can. I'm going to destroy data. I'm going to break things. If it's on GitHub, I'll run it. Why not? I'm a criminal. I don't care. Do crime while you're doing crime. Don't do crime, kids. Crime's illegal.
Third point is intervention. So obviously when you come into a red team engagement, if the client is telling you to stop what you're doing, if, for example, they believe that they've actually been breached by a real threat actor and they put a stop to your red team engagement, obviously you're doing as the client tells you to do and you're obliged to do so.
Whereas, as a criminal, I'm going to speed run to my objective. So once I've been caught, I'm just going to try and get out. I'm going to smash and grab. I'm going to get as much data as I can, as quick as I can, and get out. I'm not bothered about detection. And if I've been detected, I'm going to try and last the environment as long as possible. I'm going to drop my hooks. I'm going to do whatever. Whereas, you're stuck.
And still for speed. So on a red team engagement where you're trying to evade detection by the blue team and you've got an objective in sight, you're going to be doing everything that you can to stay under the radar, ensuring that the TTPs that you're utilizing and the tooling has minimal IOCs and less traffic and telemetry for the blue team to detect you.
And likewise, I just speedrun things if I'm a criminal. I'll just go for the objective. If I want to try and ransomware your environment, my kind of time to live is going to be very short. Obviously, it depends on the threat actor that I am, but as a criminal, if my objective is to get data, I'm going to go straight for the data. If it's in a red team, probably want to be low and slow. If it's criminal, they get a foothold, and they probably want to act on it as soon as possible, so they're going to be time to go from initial access to ransomware is going to be pretty short. Finally,
and motivations. So there's a reason why the client has got you in to perform a red team, and that is to improve their security posture. So when you're on an engagement and you're identifying vulnerabilities, they're there looking for you in the reporting to ensure that you provide recommendations for those. Whereas you as a...
I just love money. Money's great. Give me all the money, give me all the data, allow me to do espionage. Actually, don't allow me to do espionage. I'm just going to do espionage. Because why not? They are my motivations. I think we've got about 10 minutes left, so you've got attack
I'm
paths.
going to absolutely smash through these attack paths.
On you go. Do you want to take center stage, or do you want to talk there?
I'll talk through here.
Okay.
So, as Andy mentioned previously, Scattered Spider, or Spider, is a code name relating to equine threat actors. This is an example attack path that Scattered Spider has known to use with their TTPs from initial access all the way through to actions and objectives. So if we start on the left-hand side, they are known to utilize valid account credentials. Thank you very much.
The bottom one's the laser, don't blind anyone.
There we go. Valid account credentials, so that's where they're utilizing breach databases or stealer logs to identify accounts that could be used for initial access. They're then utilizing those if SMS MFA is known to be used on their external interfaces. They're then utilizing techniques such as SIM swapping to then bypass the SMS MFA authentication to gain initial access. They're also known to utilize phishing. So last year they hacked quite a big US firm that deals in casinos, as you may know. And one of those activities and TTPs that they performed was password resetting and MFA resetting. So utilizing phishing to contact the initial IT help desk, they were able to gain initial access into the environment. Once they're into the environment on the identity SaaS applications such as Okta or Microsoft 365, they then look to...
Other products are available.
Other products are available. They look to modify the authentication methods. So this is where they'll add their own MFA method to the accounts that they've been able to compromise, enable them to obtain persistence within the environment. They've also been known to access internal applications such as CyberArk, AWS, Microsoft 365, and especially Outlook to create email transportation rules. So this is where, in an environment where if suspicious activity is detected on a user account, you may see emails being sent to an account going, is this really you? This activity's been actioned on a particular application. Changes have been made. What Scout have been known to do is redirect or delete those emails entirely. So creating redirection rules within Outlook, so those emails are then redirected to a particular folder, so they're not reaching the inbox, or just deleting them in their entirety. They're also known to access Citrix VDI workstations, where they'll look to install remote management tooling, such as AnyDesk or TeamViewer. That also enables them to obtain persistence within the internal environment. Once they've obtained access to a workstation, they then look to perform internal enumeration. That's with Active Directory utilizing tools such as AD Explorer and PowerShell. They have also been known to conduct credential dumping, which I will speak to down here, and utilizing proxy tunnel tooling such as ngrok, pingy, and chisel to allow them to perform activities on their own host virtual machines, for example, and then using a SOX proxy into the environment to conduct their activities. Once they've obtained credentials which are valid for VMware vCenter, if many of you don't know what VMware vCenter is essentially the crown jewels for cloud and virtual machine hosting. Once they gain access to vCenter, they're known to perform data exfiltration on virtual machines. So organizations may look to host SQL databases on SQL servers within vCenter. They've been known to exfiltrate those from the virtual machines, or just ransomware the virtual disks of those virtual machines in their entirety. They've also been known to create unmanaged virtual machines within the vCenter. This allows them to have a virtual machine within the client environment without any of the client's security tooling on it. So if they're using CrowdStrike Falcon, that obviously won't be on there. So they have basically free reign to upload and perform any activity that they want from the created virtual machine. What they can also do is two things. That they can mount the domain controller VMDKs if they've got a domain controller within vCenter.
Worth noting, if it's not encrypted. If it's encrypted, it becomes more difficult.
If it's not encrypted, then they're able to exfiltrate the ntds.dip file, which is the Active Directory file for a domain. If anyone saw Neil's talk earlier, knows that contains the NTLM hashes of every user within the domain itself. They've also been known to perform AWS account compromise and utilizing their own simple storage buckets to exfiltrate that data from. And also, if a client utilizes Snowflake, which is a SaaS application which holds a whole bunch of sensitive data, they've also been known to exfiltrate that data as well from their Snowflake account. That way?
Yep.
Yeah. And this is an example red team attack path. So, as you can see from the initial access and the discovery portion, we are pretty similar when it comes to e-crime threat actors.
We're not criminals though, we don't do crime.
We are, but ethical.
No, not ethical. Got permission.
That. We perform payload delivery, so we can utilize valid tooling such as Microsoft Teams to send malicious links and attachments to internal users. We also utilize valid account credentials similar to Scattered, where we're utilizing breached credential databases and stealer logs to obtain credentials, and also credential capture phishing. So utilizing tools such as EilJinx to spoof login pages for Microsoft and Okta to obtain credentials, but also authentication tokens and cookies. These are, especially when the client environment is utilizing MFA, which most do nowadays, capturing the cookies is essential. And it also allows us to not have to worry about the MFA. As those tokens have already been authenticated, we can utilize those, put them in our browser, and access the internal environment without having to worry. So once we've gained access to the identity SAS, Okta, Entra, or user workstations, we then look to utilize our access to access internal applications. That's through enumeration, such as utilizing tools such as ADI DNS dump, or common subdomains, so looking for Jenkins, Confluence, that kind of thing. This is where we then look to utilize our reteaming ability to review the documentation of a client. This is where we're looking for sensitive credentials or hard-coded credentials, AWS secret keys, for example. This is where the sensitive data hunter comes in. And exploitation of dev pipelines and applications such as Jenkins, GitLab, GitHub to identify credentials. We also utilize proxy traffic tunneling, utilizing tools such as Chisel to perform our internal AD enumeration, so utilizing a SOC 5 proxy on a virtual machine on our own environment to traffic AD Explorer, for example, into an internal environment. So they're not seeing AD Explorer being executed on disk, they're just seeing the LDAP queries being made to a domain controller. So that's where we kind of come to the end of where we kind of match the equine threat actor, where some of these actions on objectives are just a couple of examples of what we've been able to achieve at the CrowdStrike Red Team. So I guess the difference between us as a Red Team and an equine threat actor is what we're showing as impact to a client, whereby we're not trying to destruct their data, we're just showing what we are able to do with the level of access that we've obtained. And when it comes to red teaming, it's not all about getting domain admin. We're trying to show impact for that particular client, and depending on what their business is or what sector they're in. For example, this left-hand side, they were a national highways agency, and they wanted to see if we could access their SCADA and their industrial domains. So what we were able to do is obtain root access to their entire infrastructure systems, which allowed us the ability to open and close live highway toll booths of a large European country.
It's worth noting that the client was on site at the time, and you were on the phone to them.
The client was on an MS Teams call with us, and they had the laptop turned the other way around on this actual toll booth. So we can see as we're literally just pressing enter on a PowerShell prompt in our laptop, seeing this toll booth open and close on a live highway is crazy. And the second one is one that Andy performed not long ago, is being able to compromise client application source code. So having the ability to
push to prod.
Yeah, compromise the CI/CD pipeline of an organization, and having the ability, utilizing his git commit stomping, to introduce malicious code into production pipelines. Again, proving access and the impact that we can perform at an organization without gaining domain admin.
It's worth noting as benign code. I wasn't allowed to push C2 code because that was kind of frowned upon, but you know, these things happen.
But yeah, that's us. There's a few memes there. I mean, you probably come to a talk expecting a lot of memes. I said not a lot of swearing, but you did get a bit of that. So here are some memes before we wrap up.
We've got like no time left, but has anyone got any pressing questions? I'm going to fucking shoot people now. Thanks for having us. Fuck, that was sore. Thanks.